Hey everyone, it's Deja from Knit and Crochet Ever After, and today we are going to do a bind off. So binding off when you finish your project is how you get all of these stitches off. It's pretty simple, but you just want to, be careful with a couple of things. But we're going to go ahead and get started. So we're going to do a basic bind off for like a stockinette stitch. There's also binding off in pattern and doing other things, and we'll learn about that as we go or when we're doing projects. But for now, just to get stuff off of your needles, this is the fastest, easiest way. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by doing 2 knit stitches. So we're going to knit our first stitch, and we need to knit it. We don't want to slip it. We just want to knit it off, and then we're going to knit the next stitch. So whether you're slipping your first stitch to keep your edges nice when you're binding off, go ahead and knit both. Okay, so we've got 2 stitches on our needle. Now we're going to get rid of 1. So when we get rid of 1, what we're going to do is we're going to insert our needle into that very first stitch, and we're going to bring it over our second stitch. And that's going to take this loop, and it's going to create kind of a little foundation chain on top of our knit. So we just took off 1 stitch. Now when you do this, you want to keep that nice and loose. You do not want to pull on your tail and make it tight, because then it's going to create this little bind off that's like super squished together, and it's going to make your project look yucky on the end. So we're going to do another stitch. So we're going to knit another stitch. Again, we have 2 on this side. We're going to put our needle in that first one and bring it over the second one. So you don't want to lose this loop, so you can see me kind of holding on and making sure it stays on while I pull that over, and then I pull it out. So I'm going to pull a little extra before I do that next stitch, just to give me room, so because I know this is the next one I'm pulling over this stitch here, so I'm pulling it out just a little bit, so that way I have a nice loose edge over here, so I don't have a really tight bind off. So again, I do another knit stitch, grab this one, pull it over, and then I'm going to pull this one out just a little bit. So I'm not going to have the same size as my shaft. I'm going to have it a little bit bigger, because as I go, you can see that I get this nice edge that's not scrunching up my stitches, so that way my bind off is nice and loose. So when you see the pattern say bind off loosely, that's what you want to do. You want to create some space so that when you do your stitch, you're not creating this super tight fabric at the very end, because that could ruin your project after all the time you spent. So you can see that each one of these is about the width of each of the knit stitches. So again, we always have this one over here on our needle, and then we knit that off, and we can do the same exact thing with purling. Instead of doing knit stitches, you do 2 purl stitches, and you still pull it off. So if it says to bind off in purl, it'll usually tell you. If it just says bind off, just use this bind off. If it doesn't specifically state what kind of bind off to use, pick whichever one you like doing. But if it says to bind off in purl, then you'll just do 2 purl stitches and pull one over the other, just like you're doing now. So at the very end here, what you're gonna do, it's kind of like a fasten off in crochet. Looks like I split some yarn here. Let me get rid of that. So we do our last stitch. Now we only have 2 left here. So we're gonna pull this through, and just like the very last loop that you would have on a crochet hook, you're gonna take your yarn and cut it, and then you're gonna pull it through that loop and tighten it down. And then you will have your bound off edge, and you can see it's nice and loose, so we're not pulling on our project. And then you would go and block it, especially if you're in stockinette, because you can see how it's curling now. But if it's, a regular, if it's got edging and things, you might not even need to block it. But if you need to flatten it out or stretch it out, that's when you're going to go block. But that's how you're going to bind off. If you have any questions, leave them below, and thank you for watching.